There's new research that found something very disturbing about one of the most common ingredients in modern food. And almost nobody's talking about it, not because the evidence isn't interesting, but because we all get distracted by artificial sweeteners. Every time gut health comes up online, people immediately start arguing about sucralose or aspartame. Meanwhile, the food additive that I want to talk about in this video is in almost every food in the supermarket and destroys your gut health like nothing else. It's in salad dressings, almond milk, low-fat yogurt, and many other supposedly healthy products. And the crazy part is that this additive was considered harmless for decades, specifically because your body barely absorbs it. That was the whole argument. It passes through your body untouched, so it must be safe. Which sounds reasonable, but it turns out it isn't, and the data is very clear now. So let's talk about this hidden gut health killer and what you can do to avoid it. Okay, the additive I'm talking about is actually a group of compounds called artificial emulsifiers. Emulsifiers help mix fat and water together. They make food creamy, smooth, and shelf stable. Without them, a lot of processed food literally falls apart. Your almond milk separates, your protein shake gets weird chunks, your ice cream turns icy, and your sauce breaks apart. So the food industry puts these compounds into everything because they make ultra-processed food feel better in your mouth and also survive longer on shelves. Now, there are natural emulsifiers like lecithin that exist in foods like egg yolks and soybeans. But then there are also highly processed synthetic emulsifiers that were basically designed for food manufacturing. I'm mostly worried about the artificial ones because even though they do help oils and water mix in processed foods, they also interact with the mucus layer inside your gut. That mucus layer is incredibly important. Most people imagine the intestines as this hollow tube where food just moves through. But your gut lining is actually protected by this thick, slimy barrier that keeps trillions of bacteria at a safe distance from your intestinal wall. You want bacteria in your intestines, but you don't want them pressing directly against your gut cells all day long. That separation matters a lot, and researchers started noticing that some emulsifiers kill that barrier. One of the most famous studies on this came out years ago in mice, and the results honestly shocked the researchers themselves. They gave mice artificial emulsifiers, and they completely changed the gut microbiome. So they thinned the mucus layer and allowed bacteria to move closer to the intestinal wall. The mice developed more inflammation and worse metabolic health. So suddenly the researchers started asking a much bigger question. What if processed food isn't only harmful because of sugar, calories, or lack of nutrients? What if some additives are physically changing the gut environment itself? But critics pushed hard against that type of research, and honestly, fair enough, because mouse studies are useful, but they're not in humans. You can make mice sick with all kinds of stuff that doesn't really matter for many of us. So for years, people kept saying the same thing. It's an interesting theory, but where's the human evidence? Well, then researchers finally did a controlled human trial, and it confirmed pretty much everything. They tested an emulsifier-free diet versus an artificial emulsifier-heavy diet for just 11 days. That's it, less than 2 weeks. And the results got pretty unsettling pretty fast. The emulsifier again changed the composition of the gut microbiome, reduced bacterial diversity, and depleted beneficial compounds that are produced by gut bacteria. This is super important, so let me explain why exactly it matters. Your gut bacteria constantly produce compounds that help regulate inflammation, immune function, and just your metabolism, even the integrity of your gut lining itself. One of the biggest groups of these compounds are short-chain fatty acids. These are basically anti-inflammatory fuel molecules that are produced when healthy gut bacteria ferment fiber. They help nourish the cells which are lining your colon, and they help maintain that mucus layer we talked about before, and they help regulate your immune system. And in the study, all of these compounds dropped a lot after the emulsifier exposure. Now, if that was the only finding, it would already be interesting, but it gets even worse. In some participants, bacteria started moving very close to the intestinal wall, and researchers call this microbiota encroachment, which sounds technical, but the concept is very simple. The bacteria started invading territory that they normally shouldn't be in. And once bacteria start interacting too directly with your intestinal lining, the immune system notices. Your immune system is constantly scanning your gut, and it has to decide every second what is harmless and what is harmful. If that barrier gets disturbed, your immune system becomes more reactive and more inflammatory. So over time, that can spiral into bigger issues. What makes this story especially creepy is how invisible all of these compounds really are. Nobody wakes up after eating ice cream and says, wow, I think the emulsifiers damaged my mucus layer. That's not how this works. It's very slow and chronic, so tiny exposures over years and decades. And modern diets are completely saturated with these compounds. If you eat mostly whole foods, then your exposure is probably low. But if your diet is built around packaged snacks, protein bars, flavored yogurts, low-calorie desserts, and just processed fitness foods, then you're probably consuming emulsifiers every day. Now, before you panic, there is nuance here. Not all emulsifiers are the same. We're mostly worried about synthetic emulsifiers, and again, natural versions do exist like lecithin. These usually aren't a problem. I actually supplement lecithin because it helps with bile flow. And even in the study on synthetic emulsifiers, they used very high doses, which were higher than what most people consume from a single food. But here's the thing that nobody really knows yet. What happens when you consume smaller amounts from 10 different foods every single day for maybe 10 or 20 years? That's the question that matters for most people. And even though nobody eats pure emulsifier powder, many people do eat ultra-processed diets that are loaded with dozens of additives that definitely interact with each other. Artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and preservatives. And we are only now starting to realize that they probably shouldn't study these compounds in isolation anymore, because real processed food is basically a chemistry experiment. And here's the interesting part. The people most obsessed with gut health are often still eating huge amounts of emulsifiers without realizing it. I see this all the time. Someone cuts out sugar, takes probiotics, drinks kombucha, buys expensive green powders, and then eats 3 protein puddings or 2 low-calorie ice creams. A lot of these healthy products are absolutely loaded with gums, stabilizers, and again, emulsifiers, because they need them to create that creamy texture without any real fat or sugar. The food industry figured this out years ago. People crave texture almost as much as they crave taste. We like the creaminess and the smoothness. It feels rich on our tongue, and thick sauces feel more satisfying, so companies engineer these textures artificially. And emulsifiers are one of the main tools that they use to do this. The problem is that your gut evolved around actual food, not industrial texture chemistry. And what's also fascinating is that researchers found the tolerance to these compounds was very individual. So in this study, some participants reacted a lot stronger than others. Some got crazy gut upset and inflammation, while in others there were problems but not so severe ones. And honestly, that lines up perfectly with what we see everywhere in nutrition. Some people tolerate garbage food surprisingly well for decades. Others fall apart very quickly. And as always, genetics matter, stress matters, and just your existing gut microbiome. This is really where the whole conversation gets bigger than emulsifiers themselves. We've spent decades assuming that if an additive is not directly toxic or maybe carcinogenic, then it's fine to eat. But the gut microbiome completely changes that equation. Now researchers are starting to realize that all of these compounds don't necessarily have to be absorbed, and they can just stay inside your intestine and still massively affect your gut health. And no, this doesn't mean everyone needs to panic over tiny amounts of emulsifiers, but I do think we need to look beyond sweetness and also take a good look at all the other artificial ingredients in most of our foods. The really ironic part is that artificial sweeteners got almost all the attention online. So every influencer has made videos about aspartame or sucralose, but emulsifiers stayed mostly invisible because nobody really knows what they are. They sound technical and boring, but based on this gut research, they honestly deserve way more attention than they're currently getting. Before I end this video, if you want more info on gut health and other holistic topics, make sure to check out the video description for free resources, related videos, and my programs. They will help you optimize your health and energy. And if you're watching this because you don't know where to start, definitely check it out. This stuff was life-changing for me. It'll save you years of research and helps you avoid the most common mistakes that I see beginners make all the time. For more info, just open the description. It will all be listed there.